911, what is the address of your emergency?
I'm in a car in a lake.
Where?
She's in a lake and her doors won't open?
Did she say where she is?
A desperate search for a sinking car. Chanelle Anderson was delivering newspapers in the dark when she veered into a neighborhood pond. Her only lifeline, a cell phone and 3 numbers.
Where? Where are you? What lake?
Fairway off of Batesville. 30188.
Okay, is that the address where the lake is?
Yes, ma'am.
Give me the address again. Make sure I have it right.
Were you able to pull the address up?
Ma'am, moving it out very quickly.
Give me the address one more time. It's not working.
You can't find the address?
No, we've got everybody out there looking for it.
19 minutes ticked away before rescuers found the pond, and 29 minutes after Chanelle called 911, Cherokee County firefighters pulled her unconscious from the sunken SUV. They found her too late to save her life.
She knew where she was. She told 911 where she was exactly. And for them still not to be able to locate her is insane.
Chanelle's mother wants to know why her daughter's cell phone never gave 911 her location.
They couldn't locate her. As something as simple as locating someone in today's society, where you have GPSs, where you have apps that have locator services, you're telling me 911 doesn't have the capability to locate someone on a cell phone?
Chanelle called 911 for help, but ended up spending her last breaths helping 911 simply find her.
Give me the address one more time. It's not working.
Fairway, S-A-I-F-O. It's all going on,
Ma'am, I lost her.
Let's play that back one more time.
Give me the address one more time. It's not working.
Why didn't they have that address? We typed Batesville at the Fairway into Google Maps and it came right up without using road or street or the zip code like the victim did. But 911 doesn't use Google Maps. Instead, they use computer-aided dispatch. This is a computer grid connecting the radios and the telephones to GIS, the Geographic Information System. This is a hyper-accurate proprietary map that has every house, every firehouse, every fire hydrant in the city. But it has one fatal flaw. It stops at the city line. If you hit a cell tower outside their jurisdiction, they don't know where you are.
If the phone had automatically routed to the correct jurisdiction, this very well may have a different outcome.
911, what's the address of your emergency?
Alpharetta 911, among the top accredited communication centers in the nation, answered Chanelle's call for help. But she wasn't in Alpharetta. The pond was 100 yards outside Fulton County.
The address of that tower determines which 911 center that call goes to. It's not based on the location of the telephone.
Emergency callers get connected to the wrong 911 center so often, dispatchers have dedicated buttons to transfer victims to neighboring departments. There was a cell tower within sight of the pond, but Chanelle wasn't a customer of that wireless carrier. Her call was picked up by this tower 3 times farther away in the next county. Do you have calls every day where you don't know where the phone is?
Every day we receive calls. We get a tower address and that's it.
70% of all 911 calls now come from mobile phones, but call centers nationwide are seeing a significant decrease in the number of emergency calls that deliver a dispatchable address. My phone knows exactly where I am, but my phone doesn't tell you where I am?
Your phone does not transmit that data to the 911 center.
Instead of my phone pushing this information to you, the phone company and the 911 center has to pull it from the phone to the tower.
Correct.
Sometimes the location appears in seconds, sometimes minutes.
There are times that it doesn't come up at all.
Fairly, Batesville, and where?
The Fairway and Batesville.
Batesville and what?
The Fairway is the street, ma'am.
Fairway, I don't have that.
The phone didn't tell you where she was, and so you had to get it from the victim who's in a sinking car.
More than likely her phone already possessed that information. The system for 911 doesn't use that information in an automatic mode.
The wireless location system used by 911 today was designed nearly 2 decades ago, long before the arrival of the GPS-enabled smartphone.
Why is it more important for a 99-cent app to know where we are than the 911 operator who answers the call? When you call 911, you need to know where your location is, because right at this point in time, your phone is not going to tell them.
Before the ambulance siren blares, before the first fire truck leaves the station,
911, what's the address of your emergency?
911 answers the call. These are the first responders, and their first words aren't "what's the emergency," but "where."
What's the address to your emergency?
They need to start taking the money and using it to upgrade the system, because the technology is already there.
Jaqueen Curley lost her daughter Chanelle after 911 couldn't locate her cell phone. Chanelle was trapped inside her SUV at the bottom of this Cherokee County pond. Alpharetta 911 got the call through AT&T, but it came with no location other than the tower. Just 2 days later, Alpharetta signed this check to AT&T for $11,873 to cover 1 month of E911 location services. This 911 center was forced to write a check to the wireless phone company for providing location information that they didn't provide to save your daughter's life.
In any other industry, that would be called fraud. My daughter called, there was no location services provided to her, and now that 911 center has to cut a check back to the cell industry because they say they provided a location service.
Give me the address one more time. It's not working. Ma'am, I lost her.
We pump a lot of money into our cell phones every month. Out of this bill, $1.50 goes to 911 service. The phone companies then have to send all of that money to the cities and the counties for 911. But Georgia law allows the phone companies to back bill the 911 centers 30 cents per subscriber. And that's why 911 centers are writing monthly checks to these for-profit phone companies with your 911 money.
Why should we cut a check back to them when they're already mandated by the FCC to facilitate 911 location?
We took that question to Washington and the FCC's chief of public safety. When funding is such a huge component of fixing this problem, if any of that money is going to the profit of a private company, just for them to comply with the law, shouldn't it be the cost of doing business?
Absolutely. I mean, it would be egregious if, in fact, 911 funds that did go to companies to provide a service at all contributed to a for-profit element of their company.
That would be against Georgia law. The phone companies can bill for only the actual cost of providing wireless enhanced 911 services. The same law allows each 911 center to audit the phone companies, but only one has tried and failed. Cobb County wrote checks like this to AT&T last year totaling $749,000. So Cobb's auditor asked AT&T and other carriers to prove that any money paid by the county went to actual 911 costs. None of the companies responded with proof. Cobb officials can't even tell us why, because carriers required them to sign non-disclosure agreements. If they're not providing proof of that, should they keep cutting checks to them?
Absolutely not. Georgia needs to change the law.
That's what the governor's 911 commission recommended in 2014, but the commission report is gathering dust on the governor's desk. Meanwhile, the phone companies and their lobbyists have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars at the state capitol and more than $10 million a year lobbying the federal government.
And then they take the money so that they can make sure that they don't have to comply. That makes absolutely no sense. Enough is enough. Adhere to the rules. We're not going to take it anymore.
I cannot get this address to come up.
And they're screaming, call 911. I'm trying to find you on a map.
You can't find the address?
No.
For what address, ma'am?
Give me the address one more time. It's not working.
Lost on the line.
What's the address to your emergency?
I don't know. We're on Lake Lanier. Our boat quit and it's sinking.
I don't have that. Is that in Milton? What city is that in? I lost contact. I was trying to get that location.
What agency you with?
She was unable to tell the dispatcher where she was.
Give me the address again.
They searched for 8 hours.
I don't even know if you're in my county. You could be in Forsyth County.
8 hours before they found Miss Thomas.
There's a lot of screaming, help, help. Please.
Okay, but I don't even know where
referring to, ma'am. And she died the next day.
Cell phones have allowed us to reach 911 from anywhere, but rescuers can't reach us if they can't find us.
Were you able to pull the address up?
I don't think it's ours. It's not on our map.
Did she say where she is?
We're trying to find you on the map, sweetie. Your cell phone's hidden, okay? Ma'am, I lost her.
The 911 location accuracy gap is not a theoretical future crisis. It's an issue now.
The chief of the FCC's Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau wrote, "We are not where we need to be on location accuracy for wireless 911 calls. This puts American lives at risk." 12 days later, Chanelle Anderson spent her last breaths trying to tell 911 where to find her sinking car.
December 17th, 2014.
This is 12 days before.
Just 12 days before my daughter passed in the car.
Jaqueen Curley holds the letter that may have foretold her daughter's death. The FCC knew even a few minutes of delay can cost lives.
Trying to find where she was, no instructions were given on how to save your life because they were so focused on, well, where is she?
Who would have believed that there could be an app on your phone and a car would show up precisely at your front door? You know, it'd be great if there was Uber for 911.
That's the chairman of the FCC, but instead of mandating the creation of a 911 app, the commission approved new standards that show just how bad the problem is.
Within 2 years, they must meet these standards for 40% of all wireless 911 calls.
That's right. The FCC is giving the wireless carriers another 2 years to locate 40% of cell phones calling 911. In 3 years, they'll have to find half. In 5 years, 70%.
At 6 years, they must deliver dispatchable location or X and Y coordinates within 50 meters of the caller for 80% of all wireless 911 calls.
6 years from now, 911 could still be unable to find 1 out of every 5 emergency callers.
Gwinnett County 911, what's the location of your emergency?
But 19 years ago, the FCC required wireless carriers to locate 95% of GPS-enabled phones in an emergency. Those rules technically still apply, but only to outdoor calls. More than half of cell phone 911 calls come from indoors. The FCC had proposed a 30-second limit to locate all wireless 911 calls, but the commission abandoned the 30-second rule for indoor calls, instead adopting new standards written largely by the big cell phone companies. One commissioner wrote it would be unfair to saddle them with obligations that cannot be met.
The focus should not be on the cell phone companies who are providing the service. The focus for the FCC should be on saving people's lives, like my daughter, Chanelle.
The call of the lake is often followed by a call to 911.
Hall County 911, what's the address to your emergency?
I don't know. We're on Lake Lanier. Our boat quit and it's sinking.
The first question, what's the location of your emergency, is Lake Lanier. That is a challenge.
And it's a boat wreck.
They cannot swim. There's a lot of screaming. There's things. He doesn't have a life jacket.
I'm trying to find you on our map.
It's an extreme challenge to try to figure out, where that caller is calling from.
Lake Lanier, 58 square miles of water with boats crisscrossing the invisible borders of 5 counties.
I don't even know if you're in my county. You could be in Forsyth County.
I'm standing at the intersection of 3 different counties, Forsyth, Gwinnett, and Hall County. Each has its own 911 center. How do I know where I am? I have a handheld GPS that also happens to be my lifeline to 911. When you're using your phone to call for help, you can't always see where you are in your GPS. And as it turns out, neither can the 911 dispatcher.
Is there anyone hurt?
It only takes one call, not knowing where that caller is, and it could be a tragedy.
There are no cell towers on Lake Lanier. They're all on shore in a nearly 700-mile-long ring around the lake. The closest tower is often in the next county, and it's this tower's location, not your phone's, that determines which of the 5 counties answers your call.
It's freezing.
We're trying to find you on the map, sweetie. Your cell phone's hidden, okay?
Sometimes your phone eventually tells 911 your coordinates on the lake. Sometimes you're lost on the line.
Where are you now?
We want to be able to find that caller, and we want to be able to find that victim. And that not be 50, 60% of the time. We want it to be 100% of the time.
Hall County 911 is the address to your emergency.
How do you tell the dispatcher where to find you?
All right, what's the address?
If this is all you see in every direction, the middle of the lake has no addresses or cross streets.
Can you see a buoy marker or anything about where you're at?
No, it's very dark.
Several people have died waiting for rescuers to get to them on the water. So now all 5 counties share a single detailed map of the lake, including overlays of every buoy and dock number. Unlike others, this map doesn't stop at the county line.
That right there is Hall County.
Our boundaries extend beyond the boundaries of Hall County. And what I like to tell people, there are no boundaries on Lake Lanier.
We've got people coming to you, okay? We've got a boat that's going to get out on the water.
Our goal, we're going to find you.
There's also a single shared frequency for first responders on the lake. When there's a call for help, every jurisdiction switches over to the lake channel, and all rescuers race toward the victims, even if they could be in the next county.
Just a fascinating story. A question for you. Is the cooperation between the 5 counties there on Lake Lanier unusual, and could that be used as a model for Georgia?
It really could be a model for the whole nation, DeMarco. It's unusual, and while other counties have different levels of interoperability, tonight there is still no state oversight in Georgia, no state agency coordinating 911. We're going to see if we can change that.
Unbelievable. All right, Brendan, thank you.
911, what is the address of your emergency?
The FCC's Chief of Public Safety and Homeland Security listens to the last words of Chanelle Anderson.
Give me the address one more time. It's not working.
Before she lost her life, Chanelle was lost by 911. Now her voice is being heard from coast to coast.
Ma'am, I lost her.
A call for help has become a call for change.
Do you think this call is the intersection of a number of issues that 911 is facing?
It really is. First and foremost, it's a tragedy. You know, in the 911 business, you can be right 100,000 times. They'll remember you for the time you're wrong.
Admiral David Simpson had already heard Chanelle's call. The 911 community shared it nationwide after our investigation, because Chanelle is only the latest casualty of an outdated 911 system that has trouble locating cell phones more often than not in some states such as California.
And for them still not to be able to locate her is insane.
Her daughter thought 911 would be able to find her from her phone. What can you promise Chanelle Anderson's mom sitting here today?
She should know that her daughter is a hero in this, that her death, however tragic, has galvanized a county, galvanized a state, galvanized a country around this important issue.
Admiral Simpson said his FCC unit is committed to helping create a 911 app for smartphones. But right now, the best the nation's 911 system can do is work with the worst equipment.
The 911 system is designed to work with the least capable phone and the least capable 911 center. Is that accurate?
That's absolutely accurate. It's got to work consistently every time, all the time.
And that means it doesn't work with a smartphone right now.
It doesn't take full advantage of everything the smartphone might be able to bring to bear on the problem.
Because that would leave the people without a smartphone behind.
Yes.
And that smart technology has no part in the decision over which 911 center answers the call. It's always the tower's location, not the phone's.
When a member of Congress calls 911 from the nation's capital, the call could go here. Oh, I'm not in Washington, D.C. I'm across the Potomac River in Virginia. The call could just as easily go to a 911 center in Maryland, causing confusion and costing precious seconds. Nowhere in this more than 100-page order is there a call for routing by the phone's location versus the tower's location.
That would not provide a consistent enough lowest common denominator.
The FCC is raising the standards for the wireless carriers, underscoring the problem they'll have to locate just 40% of all phones by 2017, 80% by 2021. But that will include inside buildings with floor locations and apartment numbers.
To collect all of the live call data for 911, where the call came from, what technology was used to provide the location information. That's huge. We have not had that obligation on the carriers before.
It's going to take a literal act of Congress to repair the nation's 911 system. The FCC can't tell 911 centers what technologies to adopt. The agency's regulatory authority begins and ends with the phone companies. You can't tell the 911 centers what to do. You can't tell the states what to do, correct?
That's exactly right. Those decisions are at the state and local levels.
The help you get during an emergency is directly dependent on local funding and local politics. And in Georgia, even the state takes a hands-off approach. The ultimate solution may be that standardized 911 app, which could still be years away.
If the phone can find us, we should be able to find the phone.
Before the ambulance siren blares, before the first fire truck leaves the station,
911, what's the address of your emergency?
911 answers the call. These are the first responders, and their first words aren't "what's the emergency," but "where."
What's the address to your emergency?
They need to start taking the money and using it to upgrade the system because the technology is already there.
Jaqueen Curley lost her daughter Chanelle after 911 couldn't locate her cell phone. Chanelle was trapped inside her SUV at the bottom of this Cherokee County pond. Alpharetta 911 got the call through AT&T, but it came with no location other than the tower. Just 2 days later, Alpharetta signed this check to AT&T for $11,873 to cover 1 month of E911 location services.
This 911 center was forced to write a check to the wireless phone company for providing location information that they didn't provide to save your daughter's life.
In any other industry, that would be called fraud. My daughter called, there was no location services provided to her, and now that 911 center has to cut a check back to the cell industry because they say they provided a location service.
Give me the address one more time. It's not working. Ma'am, I lost her.
We pump a lot of money into our cell phones every month. Out of this bill, $1.50 goes to 911 service. The phone companies then have to send all of that money to the cities and the counties for 911. But Georgia law allows the phone companies to back bill the 911 centers 30 cents per subscriber. And that's why 911 centers are writing monthly checks to these for-profit phone companies with your 911 money.
Why should we cut a check back to them when they're already mandated by the FCC to facilitate 911 location?
We took that question to Washington and the FCC's chief of public safety.
When funding is such a huge component of fixing this problem, if any of that money is going to the profit of a private company, just for them to comply with the law, shouldn't it be the cost of doing business?
Absolutely. I mean, it would be egregious if, in fact, 911 funds that did go to companies to provide a service at all contributed to a for-profit element of their company.
That would be against Georgia law. The phone companies can bill for only the actual cost of providing wireless enhanced 911 services. The same law allows each 911 center to audit the phone companies, but only one has tried and failed. Cobb County wrote checks like this to AT&T last year totaling $749,000. So Cobb's auditor asked AT&T and other carriers to prove that any money paid by the county went to actual 911 costs. None of the companies responded with proof. Cobb officials can't even tell us why, because carriers required them to sign non-disclosure agreements.
If they're not providing proof of that, should they keep cutting checks to them?
Absolutely not. Georgia needs to change the law.
That's what the governor's 911 commission recommended in 2014, but the commission report is gathering dust on the governor's desk. Meanwhile, the phone companies and their lobbyists have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars at the state capitol and more than $10 million a year lobbying the federal government.
And then they take the money so that they can make sure that they don't have to comply. That makes absolutely no sense. Enough is enough. Adhere to the rules. We're not going to take it anymore.
Governor Nathan Deal steps before the cameras and the microphones. Is he here to announce sweeping reforms of Georgia's 911 system? No.
Your own commission said 911 is broken in Georgia. What are you going to do to fix it?
Well, you know, 911 systems are run by local jurisdictions.
The governor would not sit down with the 11 Alive investigators to talk about the death of one of his own constituents. Chanelle Anderson's last breaths, spent trying to help dispatchers find her sinking SUV, have been heard across the nation as a cry to fix 911. So we caught up with Governor Deal at a news conference about an impending ice storm, a time when other Georgia residents could be calling for help from their cars.
Is there a way that you can get out of your car safely?
911 is usually an after-the-fact notification system. We want people to be aware of what is anticipated before the fact.
What if one of his grandchildren dials 911? They're going to get the exact same service that my daughter got. Would he do something then if it was his grandchild? Probably so.
Chanelle's mother wants Governor Deal to act on this 99-page report produced by his own 911 Modernization Commission. The panel called for statewide audits of the phone companies, the repeal of the Georgia law that allows those phone companies to bill 911 centers for millions of dollars in 911 fees, and the creation of a state emergency communications board.
Your commission recommended that there be a state agency that oversees 911. Are you in favor of that?
Well, I haven't made a decision on that. I think we have supervision now on 911 in terms of trying to coordinate activities.
He has this report on his desk. Do you think he's even read it?
I don't think he's read it. He almost basically admitted that he hasn't read it.
There is no Georgia agency with the authority to create or enforce statewide standards for 911. A permanent 911 advisory committee mandated by Georgia law hasn't met in years. The governor's temporary commission laid out serious problems with 911, but rather than acting on these proposed solutions, for now the governor is leaving the fix to the cell phone companies.
Those are things that are legitimate concerns and things that I think the industry is also working with local jurisdictions to try to straighten that out.
Right now, there's zero accountability. Each county is their own accountability. Nobody checks on them to make sure the system is working properly. The cell phone industry spends their money to make sure nobody checks on them because they don't want anybody to know what they're doing. And the FCC says we're doing the best we can. Well, none of that is good enough.
One more time, it's not working. I lost her.
Chanelle Anderson's life ended here with a call to 911, but her call for help started a national investigation, showing 911 often has no better than a 50-50 chance of locating victims through their cell phones. Not a single 911 bill has made it to the floor of the Georgia General Assembly in time to become law this year. But one was proposed. House Bill 557 would have allowed the state to pocket 2% of all E911 money in return for taking over distribution of the fees that currently go straight to the 911 centers. But someone slipped this line into the funding bill. It would give the phone companies absolute immunity from lawsuits for failing to locate someone even attempting to call 911.
The language of the bill specifically says if a wireless carrier fails to provide location information, like what happened to Chanelle Anderson, Chanelle's mom can't sue them. And right now, if they can show willful and wanton misconduct, she can sue them. This would change that.
If that's what it says, that's what it says. But that particular chapter, like any other, has to be put in perspective of the whole bill.
Representative Don Parsons is chairman of the House Telecommunications Committee and the lone sponsor of the 911 bill.
Did you write this bill?
Well, all bills are written by our legislative council, our lawyers. That's a rule of the General Assembly. We don't write bills.
If you didn't write it, who wrote it?
It was written by our legislative council, our lawyers who actually write bills up for us.
Right, but where did it come from? It didn't come from the lawyers.
The bill actually came, as I said, from the study committee that came out of the Senate last year.
Your name is the only name on this bill. Did you support everything in here when you presented it?
No, and I think I made that pretty clear when I did present it.
House Bill number 557.
It's a good question. I don't know. I haven't actually seen the recommendations from the study committee. I think probably what we're talking about is voice over internet, I think.
Chairman Parsons faced some tough questions from his own committee.
And then another later in the bill, and that's for the
This is the image that comes to mind when we think of legislation, the legislature. But this is not where laws are written. This is merely where the lawmakers take their final vote. The bills aren't even written in committee. The first draft of a bill is often written by a lobbyist.
It was written by our legislative council with input from the representative for the city of Atlanta.
Would that be Mr. Highsmith?
That would be,
Okay. Are you aware Mr. Highsmith is also a lobbyist for AT&T?
Specifically, I did not know that till you just told me.
Robert Highsmith, please.
Lobbyist Robert Highsmith told the 11 Alive investigators he was representing only the city of Atlanta when pushing the 911 bill, not his other client, AT&T.
Is anybody here from AT&T?
AT&T's regional vice president of legislative affairs was in the committee room.
My name is Kevin Curtin with AT&T.
But spoke about another measure, not 911. Chairman Parsons is retired from Bell South, now AT&T. The company has donated thousands to his re-election campaigns. And for years, AT&T Vice President Kevin Curtin paid for lunches and dinners with the representative.
AT&T has a lobbyist, and the city of Atlanta has a lobbyist. Where's the lobbyist for Chanelle Anderson?
Well, Brandon, we all as representatives, there are 180 of us, 56 senators. Our job is to represent our constituents.
After the 11 Alive investigators and county 911 directors started asking questions, Chairman Parsons decided not to ask his own committee for a vote on his own bill.
You know, we're not voting on the bill today. We're not going to vote on it tomorrow. The next day is something we're looking at for next year.
They received a call from a female that said that she was in the lake and losing air.
Okay, I need units to start. Possible drowning.
Rescuers race to find Chanelle Anderson, but they're literally in the dark. They have no idea where to start looking.
She's inside a vehicle in the water and the doors will not open.
Because the call reaches the wrong 911 center, Alpharetta dispatchers are looking for an intersection that doesn't exist on their own maps. So dispatchers make their own call for help. Dialing the AT&T hotline to ping the location of Chanelle's cell phone.
Your call may be monitored and recorded for quality purposes. You have reached the AT&T National Compliance Center of AT&T. If you are calling from a 911 emergency center, or if this is a life or death matter, press 4.
AT&T Compliance, this is Judy. How can I help you?
Hey, Judy, it's Alpharetta Police in Georgia. We need subscriber location and subscriber information on a 911 call we just received.
All right, give me a moment. Okay, was a 911 hang up?
No, it's a female drowning in a lake somewhere.
All right, and you're wanting subscriber information?
Subscriber and location.
All right, hold on, please.
Already more than 2 minutes into the call, the Alpharetta dispatcher is placed on hold while firefighters are still searching for the pond.
Y'all located the vehicle?
Negative, we're still.
Robin, get an updated location for your unit.
After more than 3 minutes listening to hold music.
All right, thank you for holding.
Yeah.
I tried pinging the phone once already, and it came back that it's either turned off or at a location where it cannot be pinged. I'm going to try one more time, okay?
Okay, thank you. Shoot.
Give me 1 second, all right?
Okay, thanks.
With the Alpharetta dispatcher listening to hold music for a third time, now 8 minutes into the call, Cherokee County firefighters find the pond.
Yeah, we got one vehicle. It looks like it's all the way underwater right now. And we do have a vehicle in the water. You see the headlights.
We think we found the vehicle or skid marks.
Okay, you guys found the vehicle?
We found skid marks to the lake. So, okay, I gotta go. Thanks.
Okay, bye-bye.
And a half hour after Chanelle called 911,
Patient is out of the vehicle. Rural Metro's going to be working for the rest of this time.
we now know AT&T had pinpointed the location of Chanelle's phone 33 seconds after she called 911. That's right, AT&T's computer gave 911's computer the precise GPS coordinates. But since the pond was in the next county, the address did not plot on Alpharetta's maps. And later at the AT&T 911 hotline, that automated location information was not displayed on the operator's screen.
I try the best to see if I could ping it. It's not pinging, but give me a moment, okay?
Yeah, she and her car might be in the water, so.
I did twice already, but let me try one more.
Okay, thank you.
By that point, both Chanelle and her phone were likely underwater, which is why the AT&T operator couldn't ping the phone's location. But remember, both AT&T and the 911 center already had the location of this pond. They just couldn't see it.
The false sense of security that we've all been spoon-fed. If you call 911, help is going to be on the way. And that's not always the case.
We played the AT&T call for Chanelle's sister, Tiffany.
Her car is in the water. Yeah, I'm thinking her car is alive.
She tried holding her breath while listening to the hold music, knowing her sister was doing the same thing.
Lady, hold your breath for that long. How much faster would you move then?
She knew where she was. Her phone knew where she was. The phone company knew where she was. And they still couldn't find her in time to save her life.
It's just frustrating because even if I know where I am and I'm telling you where I am and my phone knows, it's not a guarantee that help will get here.
911, what's the address of your emergency?
Alpharetta 911 is now extending its maps about 5 miles beyond the city limits.
Are you at that location now?
And training all dispatchers on how to help people trapped in sinking cars. But across the nation, cell phone calls still routinely go to the wrong 911 center, and victims are still lost on the line.
You know, my sister, this could be you. This could be your neighbor. This could be your mom. This could be your sister. This could be your dad. It's not isolated at all.
Where are you now?
911 is stuck in the 20th century. Unable to take advantage of today's smartphone technology, operators and dispatchers start by asking not what's the emergency, but where.
911, what's the address of your emergency?
Upgrading this technology will take money, and Georgia's emergency dispatch centers are dependent on 911 fees collected by the phone companies.
We're just asking them to obey the law. We're filing suit on behalf of two of the largest counties, Gwinnett and Cobb.
Former Governor Roy Barnes and a team of attorneys just filed multi-million-dollar lawsuits against more than a dozen phone companies. AT&T alone is on the hook for more than $37 million, according to the county's complaint under Georgia law.
It gives the counties the right, the exclusive right, to audit the phone companies to make sure they're collecting the right amount of money and also remitting the right amount of money.
Correct.
And what happened when Cobb County, they're the only county that I'm aware has ever tried to audit the phone companies. What happened when they tried?
The providers refused, wouldn't provide the information, wouldn't allow the audit, which is part of the lawsuit that we're filing also.
One of the largest phone companies had responded with, according to the audit I read, unintelligible data. Basically, they buried them in data that couldn't be read. Is that accurate?
That's a very accurate.
The 11 Alive investigators uncovered that failed Cobb audit earlier this year, also revealing the checks 911 centers are forced to cut to some of the phone companies every month, despite a lack of proof those companies are using the money to upgrade 911. Our investigation exposed a since withdrawn proposal in the General Assembly that would have expanded the phone company's immunity while taking the county's audit powers away.
I will tell you what's happened in some other states too is the telephone providers have run to the legislature and say, give us amnesty for all of our sins of past. In other words, after you steal the chicken out of the coop, don't make us give the chicken back. And just forgive us. And it would not surprise me if they tried to do that here.
Ma'am, I lost her.
Georgia's 911 system couldn't find Chanelle Anderson's sinking SUV in time to save her. Now, a year later, Georgia 911 centers are forced to fight for every penny to bring their equipment into the 21st century. It's not about saving money, but saving lives.
The safety of the people of the Atlanta area, the people of Georgia, is really at stake here, right?
There's no question about that. By withholding these funds for profit, putting profit over safety, the providers have put us all at risk.
The subject called 911. He stated that he didn't know where he was at, that his car is in the water and sinking.
He's possibly going to be out of oxygen.
And I was unable to be able to ping his location from our system.
At this point, it ain't good.
I've tried calling him back numerous times, and I'm not able to get him back.
George Treadaway was lost on the line.
This ain't no wild goose chase. That man's in trouble.
Gordon County 911 won't release his call because they say he drowned on the phone with the dispatcher. But the county didn't even send anyone out to search the floodwaters for his sunken car until his family reported George missing nearly 5 hours later.
Gordon County 911.
We're trying to find my daddy-in-law, and he usually takes Reese Station Road, but we know that's flooded, but we can't get him on the phone or nothing. We don't know if he's been involved in a wreck or if y'all know anything about him.
Okay, we've not had any wreck.
Yeah, he's on oxygen, and I know his oxygen tank's got to be near empty.
This is where George Treadaway called 911 from his sinking car. But to the 911 system, George's phone was invisible, and so was he. Dispatchers couldn't see this location on their screens. Instead, they were beginning more than 5 miles away and a 10-minute drive. It was the cell phone tower location. George and his phone briefly showed up here because the tower address is often the first thing a dispatcher sees, and in this case, it was all they had to go on, because George and his phone weren't here either. So the 911 dispatcher called the cell phone carrier. The operator there tried to ping George's phone, but it was likely already underwater. The last known location of George's phone was more than 3 miles away from the tower, in the other direction. The cell phone carrier had George's last location here, but this is still more than 3 miles away from where George Treadaway was fighting for his life. Rescuers had 2 addresses to begin searching for a drowning man. Both turned out to be dead wrong.
Did you get the tower hit off of it all? Because I am showing that the device was 3.39 miles from that tower to the southwest.
Show any water around in that area?
There's no lake or nothing around there. It's just all pine trees.
What did he say when he called in?
He said, I'm stuck in the water.
There was no water on that wooded hill because George called 911 from the flooded valley 3 miles away.
We found out the next day that there had been a 911 call.
But somehow Gordon County dispatchers didn't know one of their own 911 operators had already talked with a drowning George Treadaway hours earlier.
He did tell the dispatcher that the car was filling up with water, and they could hear that on the 911 tape.
I got a bad feeling about this. Something's wrong.
Okay, we'll continue to look for him.
George's body was pulled from his sunken car 2 days after he called 911 for help.
We were very disappointed in the 911 system.
I'm trying to find you on our map.
You can't find the address?
No. For what address, ma'am?
Give me the address one more time. It's not working.
The 11 Alive investigators discovered cell phone callers are lost on the line by 911 every day.
They received a call from a female that said that she was in the lake and losing air.
A year ago, Chanelle Anderson was trapped in her sinking SUV in Cherokee County, but her 911 call got picked up by the wrong call center in Fulton County.
Yeah, we got one vehicle. It looks like it's all the way underwater right now.
They found her too late to save her life.
Your own commission said 911 is broken in Georgia. What are you going to do to fix it?
Well, you know, 911 systems are run by local jurisdictions.
A year ago, we asked the governor about this 911 modernization report he commissioned, a report completed while Chanelle Anderson and George Treadaway were both still alive.
Your commission recommended that there be a state agency that oversees 911. Are you in favor of that?
Well, I haven't made a decision on that.
We asked the governor and his staff the same questions about his 911 commission report again and again, 9 separate times via email and in person over 12 months. After a year of no answers and another death, the investigators caught up with Governor Deal at a transportation news conference.
I asked you a year ago, I'll ask you again, have you done anything with your own 911 commission report?
We have put funding into 911 for local communities, but as you know, those are operated by local systems of government.
Well, then why appoint a commission to create a 99-page report and offer 8 different recommendations if you're not going to do anything
about that? You should come to some other venue rather than this one. If you want to ask about what we've talked about here today, I'll be glad to answer your question, but that is not what we're talking about.
These people died on the roads. This is
I understand that, and we are concerned about that, and we're trying to do what we can about it. But you're here asking questions about nothing that we're talking about today.
How many more of your constituents have to die before you take 911 modernization seriously?
I don't mind answering some of y'all's questions if you want to.
We live in 2016. 911 is stuck in 1996. Our smartphone knows where we are no matter where we go. Press a button, it takes us home. Press another, a car shows up. We can summon Uber quicker than an ambulance, police car, or fire truck can find us through a cell phone call to 911. Because the current system still uses technology developed 20 years ago.
911, what is the address of your emergency?
I'm in a car in a lake.
Where? Give me the address one more time. It's not working.
Chanelle Anderson was lost on the line. Her 911 call was routed to the wrong call center, and her phone never told dispatchers where to find her sinking car.
Ma'am, I lost her.
Do you believe that this technology would have saved her life had it been in her hands?
Without a doubt. There is no question.
Fred White.
When we call 911 through the cell network, we're ending up in the wrong jurisdiction.
And Michael Self.
Enough is enough. We're in a position to be able to do this. Let's solve this problem.
Are inventors determined to fix 911.
Every 30 seconds that is spent on 911, telling them who you are, where you are, what's going on, and how to get there, counts towards that golden hour.
We're parked at the edge of the same pond where Chanelle Anderson called 911 to test the existing system.
Okay, here we go.
911, what's the address of your emergency?
This is not an emergency call. This is a field technician test call only. Can you please validate the address on your CAD display? Do you have phase 2 on me yet?
Yes. Well, actually, no.
Okay.
Now it's phase 2.
And what's the phase 2 address?
Phone is showing 300 Batesville Road. My CAD is showing 374 Gables Walk.
Both of those are the cell tower. That's still about a mile away. Is this Alpharetta?
It is. We're in the wrong jurisdiction.
That's exactly what happened to Chanelle's 911 call. She was in Cherokee County, but her call hit a tower in Fulton County.
Give me the address one more time. It's not working.
Then the inventors call 911 using the same phone, but with their technology activated. It's called laser, and it uses the phone sensors to determine precise location before routing the call to the correct 911 center.
Cherokee County 911, what's the address for emergency?
This is not an emergency call. This is a technician field test call. Could you please verify the address on your CAD display?
Phone display showing 1 the Fairway.
It's 1 the Fairway in Woodstock,
yeah,
Georgia?
Yeah, showing 1 the Fairway.
That's it. That's where we are.
Using our technology, we were able to call and be located within a few feet of where we are sitting, and we were delivered to the correct 911 jurisdiction for this location.
Did our investigation actually lead to you accelerating this technology?
Yes, actually, as a matter of fact, it did.
Right after this test, another caller was lost on the line.
He stated that he didn't know where he was at, that his car is in the water and sinking.
We're sitting within feet of where George Treadaway unfortunately lost his life while trying to get help through 911 while his car was sinking.
He's going to be out of oxygen.
Nearly a year to the day after Chanelle Anderson died in Cherokee County, George Treadaway drowned in Gordon County.
And I was unable to be able to ping his location from our system.
With 911 location data miles off the mark, it took 2 days to find his car on Reeves Station Road.
Gordon County 911.
Can you please tell me the address that is currently showing on your screen?
I'm showing 1975 Reeves Station Road.
Great. And do you have a latitude and longitude?
Yes.
So we've just called 911, and Laser has us located on Reeves Station Road, right where we actually are and where we would want emergency services to come find us.
And this could have saved George Treadaway's life.
I believe so, yes.
We offered Gordon County operators an opportunity to see the new technology. 911 Director Debbie Vance, president of Georgia's Dispatcher Association, declined, writing, "The phone carriers have not heard of it, and they feel from the description we have had so far, this is a carrier issue and not a public safety answering point issue. If all carriers are not part of it, I don't see how it will benefit anyone."
There's a side of this that's sad and tragic. There's also a side of it that's just infuriating.
Fred calls Gordon County again, this time deactivating his invention and using the system George Treadaway relied upon.
Can you please tell me the address that is currently showing on your screen?
458 Brown Farm Road.
He gave us, I believe, 458 Brown Farm Road, which is the location of the nearest cell tower to us. By road, it's a little over 5 miles, and it's about a 10-minute drive.
This is the same 1996 technology 911 uses to find all of us when our lives are on the line.
In an emergency situation, a matter of a minute or two can be the difference between life and death.
It's patent pending, but Fred and Michael aren't waiting for their application to be approved. They're already working directly with cell phone carriers to get them to adopt the technology as soon as possible. It works with existing 911 systems, and they say it won't cost subscribers or 911 call centers a penny. Melissa.
Sounds wonderful.
kind of, correct me if I'm wrong here, looks like an app. So if it is, how do I get it?
Yeah, this is it. It does look like an app, doesn't it? Well, right now it is an app, but it's just in beta testing. The inventors are working to get this baked into the firmware of all phones to protect everyone without us having to buy or download anything. You'll simply call 911 and the technology will work in the background.
But still beta testing prototype at
We're
this
still
point.
waiting.
Yes, there's a head-on collision, Fulton Industrial Boulevard and Amber Road.
There's an accident out here, and somebody's injured.
It's really bad.
It's a female passenger that they pulled out of the car.
The collision happened right here at this intersection, and this is where the lady and the children have been pulled out of the car.
Okay, so numerous parties that are injured. Okay.
But I do see 2 people on the ground now instead of just 1.
I was the closest person to the accident.
Wes Price knew exactly where he was.
Cobb County 911, what's the location of your emergency?
I'm on Fulton Industrial Boulevard, and I am just north of I-20.
All right, hold on 1 second. You're in Fulton County. You've got Cobb County. Let me transfer you to Fulton.
His 911 call hit a cell tower in Cobb County, costing 30 seconds before a transfer to Fulton 911, and yet more precious time to transfer to a third emergency call center in the city of Atlanta.
Atlanta, this is Fulton with a transfer. Call advise if you're at Amber Road and Fulton Industrial Boulevard, and I'll stay on the line as well.
Okay, Amber Road and Fulton Industrial. That's on Fulton County. And is this Fulton County?
This is Fulton County, but it's showing Atlanta. That's why I was calling. I said I was going to stay on the line.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
yeah, it's coming up.
But it's showing for us that it's going to be in the city. Amber Road is not on us. We don't have Amber Road.
Okay, because it's coming up with me with South Fulton, so it's not going to allow me to dispatch.
They were wasting time, in my opinion. They were on the phone wasting time that mattered. Could have mattered in someone's life.
Do they have the physical address?
There is no physical address. I can get one nearby, probably.
So I pulled into the neighborhood and drove down the neighborhood and gave them an address off of the first mailbox that I saw.
771 Amber Road?
771 Amber Road, yes. It's just right off Fulton Industrial.
Okay, see, that's still coming up South Fulton County for me.
More than 4 minutes after his first 911 call to Cobb, and 3 different operators haven't asked what the emergency is.
I don't think that they were all that concerned about responding until I finally said, hey, look, there's an injury out here. They're pulling a lady out of a car now.
Atlanta, we're going to respond out, but also if you could respond out as well. If you could check Carroll Road and Amber Road, I'm sure that's near that area as well.
It is.
Carroll and Amber still doesn't come up for me. It says South Fulton.
They're arguing back and forth, Fulton County, City of Atlanta. I think Fulton County's coming out.
Every second feels like an eternity, and you're on the phone with 911 and you're listening to 2 dispatchers arguing over whose jurisdiction it is.
The time that they spent going back and forth about who was going to cover the emergency, I thought was valuable time, critical time, could actually matter, whether someone lived or died.
Family Engine 38, respond to Fulton Industrial Boulevard and Amber Road on an auto accident with injuries.
38.
Atlanta Fire was dispatched 4 minutes into the third call.
Atlanta.
We have fire and police en route. We had to force something through for them to go to that area.
You may know the exact spot you're calling from, and your phone likely knows where it is. But your actual location has nothing to do with which 911 center gets the call. It's always the cell tower address, which is why dispatchers have such a distorted view of your location. And emergency calls routinely go to the wrong city or county.
911 operators are doing the best that they can with the system that they've got right now.
And the system is broken.
That's exactly right.
Fred White is the co-founder of Laser, a patent-pending technology we've successfully tested at the scenes of fatal 911 calls from Georgia to Prince's Paisley Park.
Cobb County got this call, not Fulton, not Atlanta, and then Atlanta and Fulton argue over whose jurisdiction it is.
If you start out in the wrong jurisdiction, right, from where you actually are, that dispatcher then has to try to figure out where you are and then route it to who they think is correct.
The FCC put the Laser team on a task force.
We're in the wrong jurisdiction.
Trying to fix the routing problem.
Is it fair to say that essentially we're using 20-year-old technology to call 911?
It's not only fair, it's just factually true. When you use your cell phone to call 911 right now, you are going over a system that was designed and has not been fundamentally changed in 20 years.
So, Brendan, what about Laser? I mean, we know that it works, so why don't we have it on all of our cell phones?
It's really frustrating, Brenda. The Laser team is close to announcing agreements with some cities and phone carriers, but to get this on every phone, they'd have to have universal adoption by all the phone carriers, or a mandate from the FCC requiring it, and that has not happened.
Yeah, that is the frustrating part, isn't it? Because we have a fix.
Yeah, and we are going to stay on this until we get this fixed.
All right, Brendan, thank you.
2 years ago, a woman drove into the Cherokee County pond and made a desperate 911 call while trapped in her sinking car. Now, she did not die in vain.
11 Alive Chief Investigator Brendan Keefe is now concluding his 2-year investigation with the solutions that fatal call inspired. They're solutions that could save tens of thousands of lives every year.
911 was the address of the emergency. I'm in a car in a lake. Where?
The haunting last words of Chanelle Anderson.
I'm moving it out very quickly. Give me the address one more time. It's not working. Ma'am, I lost her.
Words that could not summon help in time to save her life, but Chanelle's final breaths would rise above the darkness of this Georgia pond to make all Americans safer.
We're on the cusp of really solving the problem we set out to solve.
It's amazing.
Laser is a now patented solution that fixes both 911 routing and location problems.
Let's solve it. Let's make the world a better place.
Created when inventors saw our investigation of how Chanelle Anderson was lost on the line.
A lot of times it takes media coverage to get the awareness out there for people to say, oh my gosh, I didn't even know this was a problem. It took that sort of eye-opener for us to say, okay, we can fix this.
Maximize the number of people's lives we could save.
Making sure it goes to the right place, from the moment that the call starts, that's life-saving.
The 3 most important things in 911, location, location, location. The 3 things that cost Chanelle Anderson her life. First, the pond was on the wrong side of this map, causing her emergency call to go to a cell tower in the next county. That 911 center's maps stopped at the county line, which means the dispatcher couldn't see this address on her screen in order to send help and possibly save Chanelle's life. Now that is fixed. Alpharetta expanded its geographic information system to include the neighboring jurisdiction. And the FCC, as a result of our investigation, warned all 911 centers nationwide to expand their maps as well.
By 2021, carriers deliver a usable location for callers 80% of the time, which sounds impressive until you put it like this.
6 years from now, 911 could still be unable to find 1 out of every 5 emergency callers.
That's not good enough.
Our multi-year investigation was picked up by HBO's Last Week Tonight as John Oliver spent more than 15 minutes exposing the absurdity of 911 location mistakes.
And while Georgia law does require an actual committee to help develop plans for 911, it's not exactly a robust body.
This is it. Georgia's permanent 911 advisory committee. You'll notice all 15 seats are empty. There's no one at the mic, and there's nothing on the agenda. This committee hasn't met for years because there isn't a single member currently appointed.
How the is that possible?
Georgia law requires the governor to appoint 15 members to that 911 committee. He hadn't appointed even 1.
Those are operated by local systems of government.
Why appoint a commission to create a 99-page report and offer 8 different recommendations if you're not going to do anything
about that? You should come to some other venue rather than this one.
We confronted Georgia's governor in January after he had already dodged our 911 questions for a full year, spanning the time between the drowning deaths of Chanelle Anderson and George Treadaway.
How many more of your constituents have to die before you take 911 modernization seriously?
The governor walked away, but we weren't done holding him accountable. We followed up with the equivalent of a legal brief, pointing out the law requires the governor to appoint members to the committee, and there is not a clause that allows the governor to waive this duty. In May, Governor Deal finally filled these seats with 15 new members, including the top lobbyists for Verizon and AT&T. Yet the committee room remains empty because the 911 Advisory Committee still hasn't called a single meeting in the 7 months since it was reconstituted.
Laser will be in people's hands on a very large scale just in a few months.
That's right. Laser, the life-saving invention we successfully tested in the field, will be pre-installed in every phone produced by one of the biggest handset manufacturers in a matter of months. You'll simply call 911 and seamlessly the invention will get you to the right 911 center, plus the dispatcher will know immediately where to send help.
You can save 10,000 people's lives every year by shaving a minute off of response times.
I cannot get this address to come up.
And they're screaming, call 911.
I'm trying to find you on our map.
You can't find the address? No. For what address, ma'am?
Give me the address one more time. It's not working.
This is about saving lives.
For the 11 Alive investigators, I'm Brendan Keefe.